All right, guys, so today we're going to talk about one of the laws of exponents, which has to do with multiplying exponents. In this particular lesson, what we're going to talk about is when you have two exponents, for example, x to the fourth times x to the fifth, how do we solve that? All right, so the first step is your bases have to be equal. You have to have, for example, an x and an x. You cannot have like an x squared times a y cubed because the bases are not the same. This is not possible. All right? Okay? So when you're solving them, you simply just add the exponents together. So for example, in this case up here, x to the fourth power times x to the fifth power, I'm just going to add my exponents, which is 4 and 5, and I'm going to get x to the ninth power. All right? Just like this. All right, so let's do some examples. So for example, I have a cubed times a to the fifth. So my first step, check that the bases are the same. Yep, they are. Step 2a, if the bases are different, leave them alone. If they're the same, multiply the coefficients. Remember, a coefficient is if we have a number in front of the variable, and then add the exponents. All right, so let's do that. So I have a cubed times a to the fifth. Bases are the same, so I'm going to keep, and there are no coefficients, so I'm going to keep my a the same. Add 3 plus 5, and we get 8. All right. Next one, we have c squared times d squared. Well, c and d are not the same, so we can simply write it as c squared d squared. All right, and that's it. We can't add them together because the bases are not equal. All right. Now I'm going to add some coefficients here just to make it a little bit more complicated. So let's say I have a 3 here and a 5 here. So I have 3 q to the fifth power times 5 q to the seventh power. So just like I said before, look and see if my bases are the same. If they are the same, which in this case they are, multiply the coefficients. So 3 times 5 is 15. My base is q, that stays the same. And add my 5 plus 7, which is 12. All right, easy enough. All right, so yesterday we talked about scientific notation, and as you recall, scientific notation is just a really good way to write really, really big numbers or really, really small numbers. Okay, so we can actually multiply two scientific notation numbers together. So for example, we have 1.4 times 10 to the third power times 7.6 times 10 to the fourth power. My first step is to multiply the numbers and the powers. So I'm actually going to take this problem and I'm going to reorder it. So if you notice here, I took my numbers and I set them out in front. So I took 1.4 and 7.6 and I'm going to multiply those together. Then I'm going to take my powers, 10 cubed times 10 to the fourth power, and I'm going to multiply those together. When you multiply 1.4 times 7.6, you get 10.64, and then I'm just going to add them, and then I'm going to multiply my 10 cubed times 10 to the fourth power by adding my exponents, so in this case the 3 and the 4, and we get 7. So now I have 10.64 times 10 to the 7th power. Now if you remember from yesterday, think about it. Is this correct scientific notation? No, we can't keep it like that. This number is not between 1 and 10. So I need to actually move um, the point over 1, make it into 1.064. And then since I moved it backwards 1, I need to add an exponent here, which is where we get the 10 to the 8th power. All right. So it's a very simple process. It just takes some thinking because they like to trip you up and say, okay, well, you're multiplying these two exponents, but you're actually adding them. So just make sure that you take your time and think about it. And think about it this way. When you actually have 10 to the third power, you do have 10 times 10 times 10. And when you have 10 to the fourth power, you have 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. So really, if you combine the two of them, you are multiplying 10 7 times. So it does make sense. All right. So that's all I have for you today. Just make sure that you come into class tomorrow with any questions or comments you might have about multiplying exponents together. And just remember these two rules and you will be set to go. All right? All right, have a good night.